riding down Highway 61. Sides of the roads all lined with fields, nothing but sunset in the windshield. Feel it as soon as I ride into town. This is where I go to slow down. Miles and miles of soybeans and corn. I'm in the place where the blues was born. About a mile from the big muddy river, place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my worries drift away from being out in the sun all day. No matter where in the world I go, I'll always find home on the banks of that oxbow.
All right, guys, we're back. Part 2. Eric Cagle here. Brad's going to dip into a pretty good what he won here. Tell me where you won at again.
National championship was what he won here.
Yeah. What river? What lake was that again?
The Ouachita River in Monroe, West Monroe, Louisiana.
And that was what a month or so ago.
Yeah,
September?
a month or so ago.
I want you to start out that week pre-fishing, and I want to go day by day how your pre-fishing went that week and kind of what you seen. You know, I want to kind of relive it through this podcast real quick.
Okay, I'll try to kind of shorten it a little bit. I got down there the previous Saturday to the tournament, so I had Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I had about 5.5 days to pre-fish. Mm-hmm. That was the second hurricane that was coming through. A couple weeks before, I had went down and just jumped in the boat with TC to fish. I never even pre-fished, but the hurricane was coming, so our guide trips had gotten canceled on Grenada. So I was able to go down. I didn't think I was going to be able to go, but I just went down and jumped in the boat with TC, and we ended up finishing 8th in that ACT. A couple weeks before the national championship. But I got there Saturday. Prior to the tournament, and everything that I had read on that tournament, Robert Carlisle had done really well in 2 previous tournaments there, and I knew that a lot of those guys were fishing up in that bayou, and Darbone Bayou is what I'm referring to, and I figured there was big fish in there, and my goal when I go to a tournament like that is just like everybody else to find the biggest fish, but I want to find fish that nobody's fishing. And that bayou runs all the way from the Ouachita River all the way to Darbone Dam. And I ran my boat. I fished out of a 195 bass tracker with a 150 Mercury on it. I ran my boat all the way to Darbone Dam, all the way up that bayou. I don't know how far it is, but it's a long way. And end up finding something. On Sunday, I found a cypress flat up there on Sunday, and that cypress flat was 2 foot deep when I pulled up. There's my in-laws walking by right there, and my partner. Look at my partner Bo over there. But
I like that dog.
End up finding a cypress flat up there. It was 4 foot deep, and I pulled it just beautiful, and it was in a cut. It was in an eddy. And I pulled up in there, and I'm like, dang, it looks good. And I keep trolling around. I don't see anything. And I'm about to leave, and I turn my boat right, and I see a fish out there about 50 foot. And so I ease out, and I cast on that fish, and I catch it. It's a 228. And I'm like, good Lord, Well, I look down, and I have fallen into a hole. It's 6 foot deep now where I caught that fish at. And I'm like, whoa, it's a depression here. Well, I caught 2 more fish within 5 minutes in there. I caught a 228, a 218, and a 205 within probably 10 minutes.
Damn.
And I'm like, man, I'm on them. I'm on them now. And so I'm sitting there, and I spent about an hour in there, and I went all the way around. It was like a pothole there. And it was about, I would say, 40 by 40, 40 yards by 40 yards. It's just a big pothole right there. And those fish, the whole time I was on the outside marking it, I went around and just marked it, the edges of it where I'd know where to fish. And the whole time I was going around the edge, I was seeing them big jokers just roaming in there. I'm like, oh, God, they're stacked in this hole.
They was in the hole or concentrated on the edges?
No, they were in the hole. They were just scattered in that. It's 2 foot deeper there. And it was 6 foot in the hole, and it was 4 foot all the way around. And they were on the edges and all through the middle of that hole. And, there was no cover there or anything. They were just – and that's the thing about fishing. Why were they there? I don't know. Just got lucky and saw one and figured out that they were there because it was 2 foot deeper. I don't know why they were there. I still to this day don't know why they were there. But it's little stuff like that you find that wins tournaments. I said it before.
Little details.
Yeah, everything's got to go your way, and you got to have a little bit of luck to win a tournament. And that was luck. Finding that was luck. But so anyway, I had that hole there. And I knew there was big fish there, and it was big. It had enough fish for me to fish 2 days. I seen 20, 30 fish in there.
So real quick, when you pulled up on that honey hole real quick, how many fish did you catch, and you left it alone?
I caught 3.
And you said, I'm gone.
I knew they were there, so I didn't fish. Most of the time I'll catch 2. But, they were big, so I had to catch me
You
one
had to
more.
catch one.
but anyway, so I caught 3 fish, and then I moved on. After marking it, I moved on, and the next day my goal was to build off that, to find something else in that area that I could catch another fish in if I had to. So I found two more places within a mile and a half of that place that held fish. It wasn't that big a fish, but
did it have that same depression?
Yeah. No, it was on. The other ones were in the same setup. They were on the backside of a point that created an eddy, but it was timber. Those other fish were on timber, and I caught a 190 and like a 180 something, I think it was, in those other 2 places. But there was a few more fish there. So I had 3 places up there to fish that I felt real confident that I could go up there and catch a good weight. And that second night, when I got to the house, we're watching the weather, and it's calling for like 8 inches of rain. And I'm sitting there thinking, I didn't say anything to anybody in the room with me, and I'm like sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like, I better get on that main river and find me something else to fish, just in case. Right. And if that pays off, then great. But if it doesn't, I'll have somewhere to go. So the rest of the week in the rain, it rained nonstop for 3 days there, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. It never stopped raining. For the rest of the week, I spent out on the main river, just fishing all those cuts, trying to find, something in case my plan A didn't work out. And Thursday morning, I did find fish. I found fish in Lake Hamilton. I pulled in Lake Hamilton on Tuesday, I think it was, and I caught 3 good fish in there. Like, not as good as the river, but I caught 1 2-pounder, and I think 2 fish in the 180s in there. And I knew they were there, and I already had marks in Hamilton from where me and TC had fished, because we fished in Lake Hamilton in the ACT tournament. So I just kind of stayed in there and built on that on Tuesday. And when I caught those 3 fish, I never went back to Lake Hamilton. I never even went back in there before the tournament. Tuesday was the last day I fished it. And Thursday morning, my plan was Thursday morning I was going back up the bayou to check those spots and see. And that's what I did early Thursday morning, right at daylight. I got up that bayou, and those fish were gone. They nothing. It was a ghost town, and I went and took my boat out. I didn't even stay. The rest, I knew where I was fishing. I didn't have anything else to fish. So Lake Hamilton. I had 2 spots. I had Lake Hamilton, 1 other cut, and I knew where I was going to fish. So I took out. And I hadn't been to Hamilton since Tuesday. But I knew there was fish there, and I didn't know how many other boats was going to be in there or anything like. Didn't care, and that's where I fished on day 1. And there was a lot of boats in there. There was a ton of boats in there on day 1. But those guys were fishing around the edge of Lake Hamilton, and I was right dead smack in the middle of it. There were stakes and some underwater timber and stuff, and a lot of roaming fish out there. And I think that water, in my mind, that water was coming up because of all of the rain. And I think Lake Hamilton was restocking every day. I think there was more fish coming there every night, because that water was rising. So I was in third place after day one, and I had left Hamilton about 2 hours early before quitting time, and went and tried another cut. And when I pulled in that cut, there was, I don't know how many boats in there. There was a bunch of boats, man. But I just kind of fished around a little while in there. But I was in third place. I was out of first by 3 100s.
What was your mindset to go to that other spot where all the boats didn't even fish around them? Was it a decoy wise or?
No, it wasn't. I mean, I had caught fish in there. I was just trying to go. I had my weight on day one in Hamilton. I think I weighed 1430 something on day one. But I had that weight by 10:30 in the morning, and I never caught another fish after 10:30. And
sit back, relax the rest of the day. 10:30 in the morning.
No, I mean I was still trying to call them, but I never could. And I told myself at night, I said I'm if I catch a good fish in Hamilton in the morning to start off with, 'cause I didn't know what all that boat pressure was going to do to them, and it did affect them. But I told myself I'd never leave. I'd stay there that last 2 hours. And day two was a lot different than day one. It took me all day. With 15 minutes left to go, we had to stop fishing, I think, at 3 o'clock. At 2:45, I had a 129 on my scale. I caught a 129 with a 190 with 15 minutes left to go. So day two, I had them by 10:30 on day one. On day two, it took me till 15 minutes, before quitting time to catch that last fish.
Don't pack up 30 minutes beforehand because it can be that last minute.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. But no, I mean I felt like when I caught that last fish on day two, I felt like I'd have a shot at it because I knew that the bite was tougher. I mean, it was tougher on me. I knew it was tougher on everybody else. I knew it was tougher, and when I caught that fish, I knew I had a little more weight than I had on day one, and that's my goal. That's always my goal. Is to have the same or more weight on day two. Usually, if you can do that, you're not going backwards. You're going to stay or you're going to move up, and that's I felt like after I caught that fish, I'd have at least have a shot at it. I didn't know if I could win it, but I knew I wasn't going backwards. So that's pretty how much. That's pretty much how my week went there, and I mean it was.
Let's talk about the baits that you used down
The setup.
Yeah. What equipment made the winning difference?
I had four 6-foot HH casting rods in my boat. That's all I had.
What's the particular name of that pole?
That's my pole.
He kind of alluded to that. But.
It's my signature series rod, and I've said it 100 times before. You hear. I just laugh when I hear these guys say it's the best rod on the market. Look, they all good rods, and different people, use different stuff because that's what fits them better.
Right.
It's just what I use. I mean, and I designed it for what I like, and a lot of people may not use what I use, but they catch fish. An ugly stick catches just as many fish as any other rod.
Yeah.
But my rod is designed for what I do. I cast to those fish, and this
got
is
a real light action.
Yeah, it's a medium light. It goes. I say this. A rod to me, how I tell what I like is where the backbone ends and the tip begins, and my rod has got a little stiffness to it, but the last 2 foot of that rod is straight tip. And I don't fish like a lot of other people fish anymore. I used to fish off line, watching my line. I don't fish like that anymore. I fish off pressure now that live scopes come out, and it's hard to explain to people, but I fish enough that I know the size weight I have on my rod. I use 6-pound line, high vis K9. That's all I use. I know the weight if I'm using a 16th ounce jig or if I'm using an 8th ounce jig or a 32nd. I know the weight of that jig on my rod. And when I say I fish by pressure now, if anything, if I'm reeling slow retrieving or even if I'm popping letting it fall, there's several different ways to fish. Single short poling as I call it. If anything changes on the weight of that head on that rod while I'm fishing it, I set the hook. And that's what I call fishing off pressure, because especially this week out here in this expo tournament, those fish would come up behind that bait and you would not feel anything. I mean, I would when I was coming in, if I saw that fish getting close to the bait, I'd start raising my rod a little bit. As soon as I felt any pressure, I'd set the hook. And I caught a lot of fish that some people may not have caught, you know,
yeah,
I heard
it's not just a big thump.
I heard a guy talking about it on the stage yesterday. He goes, you know, we were looking on that live scope, and those fish would come up, and they'd have it in their mouth, and we wouldn't know it. And I know exactly what he's talking about, and that's why I say I started, you know, about a year and a half ago, I started fishing off pressure rather than sight. You know, and when I'm guiding, I still fish off sight a lot. I'm watching that rod tip, and if it pecks or if it goes slack or anything that happens, and that's pressure. I'm watching pressure with the rod.
You just feel it getting tight. Feel it getting tight, you set that hook.
I always tell people when they're on a guide trip, hook sets are free.
That's right. If you're not sure, you set the hook.
That's exactly it.
But that's, you know, that rod. That's why I like that rod, and that's why I designed it the way I did, because of the way the live scopes changed the game. I mean, you know, I'm fishing off pressure now, and that's why I designed that rod the way it's designed. But I use a 6-foot rod. We're coming out with a 5.5. Same rod, same action, just a shorter rod. For a lot of guys in Alabama and all over the country that shoot docks, a lot of guys like a 5.5-foot rod to shoot docks, and I do too. If I'm fishing a bridge or shooting docks, I like a 5.5-footer sometimes too, you know, depending on what we're doing. But we'll have a 5.5 and a 6-foot HH, you know, C&M series dock shooter out, and the 5.5-foot will be here in December. So we're having it, you know, like I said, it'll be here in December. But I'm sitting here thinking how we got off on that track to what we were talking about, but the jigs that I use, I think we were talking about the Wichita, the jigs I use in that tournament. I guess I caught my fish. The jig I caught most of my fish on in that tournament was a panfish assassin, and I mean you can get them at Walmart. I mean you can get them anywhere. I've used that jig my whole life. We do a ton of night fishing. In Alabama, you know, from the end of February through May, we do a lot of night fishing on dock lights, and it's a really small. It's called a Texas avocado, is the color of the jig, but it's a black and chartreuse basically. It's made by Panfish Assassin, but that little jig on a skipper's jig, light wire. I use a light wire head. And a lot of people hate that. You know, but I'm not.
Why is that?
But because a lot of people use braid and long rods, so when they set the hook on that fish, they got a lot of pressure on it. Well, I'm not doing that. I'm casting, so when I set the hook on that fish, I think I get a better hook set with a light wire hook than any other hook. You know, when I'm casting. You know, on a big white fish, you know, on Grenada, I'll use a Grenada Lake Tackle Company head. That's what I used over there all summer. But, you know, and that light wire will catch him too. But on a guide trip, it's different for me. I know how to kind of handle those fish a little bit. When I'm fishing on a guide trip, I'll use old Patrick Stone's heads over there, man. We've caught all summer long. We caught, you know, a limit of fish on one head. You know, he makes a good head too. But when I'm fishing in the tournament, I feel like I get a good hook set with that light wire hook. I feel like if that fish touched it, it's like a needle that's going through his mouth.
Right.
And when that fish runs, I can play that fish a little bit.
Right.
And the reason a lot of people don't like them is because you can't use braid and just snatch that fish's head off, because that hook will straighten out. But when you're using a casting rod, you know, when I set the hook on my casting rod, I want to hear that drag spin a little bit. You know, I want to hear a little drag. That way, if that fish pulls, he's not going to straighten that hook out. He's going to pull drag before that hook straightens out. But that's why I've used those light wire heads for 20 years. I mean, I poured them for forever at home. I got I got 3 mows. I got a 16th, a 32nd, a 24th. I poured them for 20 years.
What size hooks are you using on them?
2/0.
2/0?
I use a 2. There's 2 companies that make that light wire hook. Eagle Claw makes a light wire. I don't know the number on them, point, whatever, I don't know, but Mustad makes one too, and they're both great hooks. But Skipper's Jigs, old Tina and Scott down in Florida, they're pouring those. I use a minnow head. I like a minnow head a lot when I'm on those light wire, but they pour those for me now, and they call it a C&M series light wire, but they that's what I used in that Wichita tournament. It's those light wire hooks with that little Panfish Assassin black and chartreuse jig on a 6-foot, you know, casting rod. But that's what I caught most of those fish on. Now, I did use a few hair jigs, Freaky Franks makes a hair jig, and I didn't even know he made a hair jig, and I saw him at the meeting before the tournament, and I bought a couple of black and chartreuse hair jigs, and I think I did catch a few fish off his hair jig. And just like this tournament, I've always got Steve's little hair jigs with me. I mean, I use them guiding, I use them all the time. But limits, I don't know. Have y'all ever seen his little hair jigs?
No.
I'm on before when we get done with this. I'm gonna grab a few and show y'all what it is. It's a real little jig, and like I said, them sometimes when them fish are finicky, and if you think about it, Brad, y'all both. The way I think about it, if those fish are real finicky and you've seen it 100 times, they'll come up behind that bait, and sometimes you can feel them just nibble on it. Like they won't really
come
bite
up licking on it.
Yeah, well,
just pushing it.
In my mind, if it's a lighter jig, like if I'm using an 1/8 ounce jig and that fish comes up behind it and he barely sucks it, he might just get the tail. Well, if it's a real light, small jig, that little suck might draw that smaller jig all the way in his mouth. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
That's the way I think about it, and I think that makes a difference, especially when it's a tough bite. I think a smaller jig, when that fish is just barely nibbling or trying to suck on it, I think if it's a smaller jig, a lot of times, even if the fish didn't mean to suck it all the way in, it's so light that just that little gulp he does, or that little jig will go right in his mouth. So I don't know. That's just the way I think about it. And I've watched it on live scope, so I know it's a little bit of truth to it. But
Well, yeah.
I can't. I guess if I knew what the fish was thinking, I'd be rich. But I don't.
You're doing pretty good ching.
Yeah, you're proving it. You're really proving it.
But I mean, there's a lot of, just like I said about the rod. I just said this before we started this podcast. It's all about what you got confidence in. If you don't have any confidence, I don't care if you're in a mud hole with 1,000 fish. If you don't have any confidence in that bait you're using, you're usually not going to catch a fish. And that's, I use what I've got confidence in. And I'll try new stuff. I mean, I try new stuff all the time, and that's how you build confidence. You catch a fish on it. You get a little confidence in it. But at the end of the day, it seems like I always go back to what's always worked. I mean, if it gets tough, I'm going back to my light wire head, and I'm going back to my little baits, and that's what I'm going to use. But I think confidence has got a ton to do with with success, crappie fishing, or any kind of fishing for that matter.
You use a lot of scent.
When the bite's really tough, I've got some Mike's garlic spray that I use. And I always keep those little balls, those little fireballs in my boat too. They got, I don't think it matters what scent. I think it's just scent, shad or garlic. But there's a lot of guys out there that, you got guys on social media that post a picture of spraying it with sunscreen or spraying it with, look, sometimes in some of these lakes, I can take this Coke cap top right here and put it on a hook, and it's a flash. Those fish are gonna come hit it. That's not when scent comes into play in my mind. Scent comes into play when the bite's really tough and that fish is following that bait, but he just will not commit to it. And Richard Malcolm over in Georgia, he makes slab slobber, and I've read some stuff, some of his stuff online before, but a fish doesn't really he don't smell through a nose. When that fish comes up behind the bait, when you got good scent on your bait, you can put it in the water and see that sheen coming off of it. Well, I think that fish kind of senses that sheen when he's following that bait up through the water. And when the bite's tough, if he's sitting there on the verge of eating it or not, when he's coming up in that water with that sheen going through his gills and all, he kind of senses
He's
that.
like, yeah, I'm going to hit that.
That's right. And I think that's when scent comes into play. Is when it's really tough, and I always keep sending my boat. Muddy Water Baits is one of my sponsors, and that's one good thing about their baits is they're already scented in the pack, so you don't have to add anything to them. They Charlie and Travis, all their baits are garlic scented in the pack, and I like that about them because you don't have to add anything. They already got it. But I use a lot of muddy water too. But that's my opinion on scent. And that's when I use it when the bite is tough. In the spring, I don't care what you got on there.
Yeah.
I mean, scent don't make a difference at
Yeah.
all in the spring, but in the winter and summer, sometimes I think scent makes a difference.
Yeah,
I
so
do.
if you're out there struggling, definitely
Mhm.
tell
Yeah,
somebody to
yeah.
get us some scent out.
Sure.
What's it gonna hurt if
Yeah.
you're struggling already? What's it gonna hurt to put some scent on there, and maybe that gives you an extra bite or two during the day,
One
or
or two
especially
more
during
fish.
the tournament. Yeah,
Yeah.
makes a big difference.
Well,
I appreciate your time here, and you're one of the guys I've been hunting for to put on the podcast.
yeah, Brad's been saying, man, we got to get Eric on. We got to get Eric
I've
on.
talked to him about 3 times. We just
I know.
never can get up.
Yeah. I'm
And
glad it's
well,
finally happened now. It's a good. I hope everybody tunes in and listens to this. I had a joy just sitting there listening to you,
He's a wealth
sitting there
of
spitting it out.
Well, I appreciate y'all having me, man, and it's been like I said, it's been a fun month, a great month for me. But I'm ready to get back to Tallis and get a little rest. I can tell y'all, I'm walking dead in here. been a long week this week for sure.
Right.
Well, we greatly appreciate it. Brad, anything else you want to add to it?
No, man, we'll have another time when we get Eric back on here again, because
Yeah.
I still want to dig in some more with him. But hey, if you didn't learn anything today, I think that you didn't listen well.
You need to go back and listen again and get your notepad out.
Yep. But subscribe, guys. If you like our show, like what we're doing, subscribe and help us spread the word. We're trying to help this sport. That is our number one goal here, is to grow the sport of crappie fishing, and it takes guys like Eric taking time out of his day to come out here and teach you guys. So
Yep. That's
take
for sure.
advantage of it.
Well, Eric, we appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank y'all for having me. Any of you guys want to come down to Alabama and do any fishing? I'm seeing them guide service on Facebook, or you can contact me 334-558-4097. I'd love to have you and get you on the boat and go slabbing for a little while.
That's
I like
right.
it.
That's right. Well, I'm Justin Berry here at the 2020 Crappie Expo, and we're out.
All right. Holla.
About a mile from Big Muddy River, a place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my words